Welcome to Fierce and Gritty, Resilience Training for Lawyers, sponsored by the American Bar Association, Commission on Lawyers Assistance Programs, Commission on Disability Rights, Solo, Small Firm and General Practice Division, Section of Family Law, Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defendants, Section of Litigation, Young Lawyers Division, Law Practice Division, Criminal Justice Section, Health Law Section, Career Resource Center, Center for Professional Responsibility, Tort Trial and Insurance Practice Section, National Organization of Bar Counsel, Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers, and the ABA Center for Professional Development. Moderating the program today is Nancy Steck. Nancy is an Associate Director for the New Jersey Lawyers Assistance Program and is located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Nancy, please begin.
Thank you. Joining me on the program are Anne Mary Bradford and Martha Knudsen. Anne and Martha are founders of Aspire. Anne is located in Huntington Beach, California, and Martha is located in Salt Lake City, Utah. For years, we have all marveled at stories of individuals who, in spite of dire circumstances, have thrived and, in fact, even prevailed. Why him or her has been a question researchers have been exploring for over half a century. What's been discovered and what you are about to explore with our panelists today is the best of that research and thinking. Anne and Martha, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. We're really excited to get to talk to you today about resilience, and we just want to take a quick moment to introduce you to who we are and how we come to this topic of resilience. My name is Anne Bradford, and I'm currently the chair of the American Bar Association's Attorney Wellbeing Committee. I had practiced law for about 18 years. I was a partner at Morgan Lewis, and in 2014, I decided to leave the practice of law to really focus on thriving in the legal profession. So Martha and I both have a master's degree from University of Pennsylvania in applied positive psychology. I'm currently about halfway through a PhD program in organizational psychology. And when Martha and I were at MAP, we were very lucky to have some great instructors that among their many expertise, one of them was resilience. And a number of our professors were responsible for developing the resilience program for the U.S. Army, the Master Resilience Program that's been going on for a number of years. So in addition to sharing ideas that we have from our own research, we're also going to use some ideas that we've learned that are currently being used for the U.S. Army's program. So we figure if it's good enough for the soldiers, that it could really apply well to the legal profession as well. Martha, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Martha Knudsen, and similar to Anne, I practiced law for about 17 years. Much of that time was as a litigation partner in Salt Lake City, Utah, and the remainder I served as general counsel for a nationally ranked real estate management company. I went to the University of Pennsylvania to gain a master's degree in applied positive psychology, and my reason for going was really to serve the legal profession. The practice of law is a wonderful career, but it is also one that can be fraught with a lot of stress and difficulty trying to have a full life and a full career. And I became really interested in positive psychology for what it can do for attorneys and our careers and our lives. And so Anne and I met there, and as she said, we have been moving forward in this direction, and really excited to speak with you today about some of these research-backed tools that we have learned.
Great. Thanks so much, Martha. So we are, that was us. There's Martha and me. we're really looking forward to sharing some of our learning about resilience, and we also want to help you get CLE credit while we do it. So let's talk a little bit about how resilience relates to the practice of law. So as you all know, the ABA model rules, as well as all of the state ethics codes, require that lawyers develop and maintain their competence to practice law. And resilience is one competency that can help you do that, and that's really the focus of today's presentation, is how resilience can help you be a great lawyer. So many of you may have already heard about the large study that was recently done, just came out in 2016, led by Patrick Krill, that found high rates of mental health challenges within the legal profession. So things like suicidal thoughts, high anxiety, alcohol abuse, stress, and depression really, again, got our attention, that especially alcohol abuse and depression really stood out as being far above the general population, and really some areas that we needed to take seriously. And one of the biggest contributors to things like depression and substance abuse is chronic stress. And chronic stress, it not only contributes to depression and substance abuse, it can also harm the executive functioning of our brains. So things like attention, concentration, problem solving, these things that are really key and critical to being great lawyers can be undermined by chronic stress. And a little bit later in the presentation, we're going to talk about the benefits of stress and how it really can fuel high performance. But first, we also wanted to underscore that stress also can be harmful, and we need to manage it. Okay, so again, stress contributes to depression and alcohol, and depression and alcohol abuse also have, its own set of harmful effects. So some of the same things that I just mentioned with stress about really undermining our executive functioning also apply to depression and alcohol abuse. So again, like working memory, planning and organizing, all of these things that are really important to being a great lawyer can be undermined by these things. So that brings us to our topic for today, which is resilience. And resilience is a word that has gotten a lot of mainstream use lately. I've seen it in a lot of articles and a lot of books, and it's not always exactly clear what people mean when they refer to resilience. And the truth is, there really isn't, in the scientific literature, there's not a consensus on the precise definition of resilience or the factors that contribute to it. But generally, the general idea is that resilience is something that helps people bounce back more quickly from setbacks. And everyone basically agrees on that. And what we have up on the screen now are some of the definitions of resilience that we like. And it really focuses on this idea of persisting through challenge and bouncing back after adversity. And the last one there, the courage to grow from stress, that we really persist in the face of challenge. And the factors that we're going to get to related to like what contributes to resilience, those are all science-backed. And what those are linked to, the factors that we're going to talk about, are a whole host of things that can benefit you as a person and a lawyer. So will this webinar today help you in some way being a lawyer? We really hope so. And what the research shows is that building up this resource of resilience helps us better tolerate stress. It helps us recover better from setbacks. Resilient people are generally more physically healthy. And then again, the last component is what the findings have been from the U.S. Army's program so far. So the Army's resilience program has been going on, for a number of years now, and they've had some really positive findings that are encouraging to all of us in this area. And what they have found is that the folks that have gone through this resilience training have decreased anxiety, decreased depression, decreased substance abuse, and decreased PTSD. And so that is really promising. And so we're excited to get to share some of the same training that goes on in the U.S. Army with you today. We want to give you just a real quick overarching framework of the basic framework of optimal human functioning. And it's really simple, but it's important. And the idea is that to be at our best, we are always needing to balance resources against demands. So resources include both things that are personal to us and things that are in our contextual, things that are within our situation. So the personal things are things like resilience, which is an individual resource, and a number of other things that contribute to resilience that we'll be talking about, like optimism and other factors. The other side is demands, which is really anything that is depleting in our lives, that can deplete our energy and bring us down. And so the idea of optimal functioning, both in your life and at work, is to balance resources against demands. When resources are higher than demands, you are more resilient and you tend toward engagement, toward work engagement and engagement in your life. On the other hand, when demands outweigh resources, that's when your resilience is overcome and you tend toward burnout. So what we're going to focus on today is really how to boost some of these resources that can help you counterbalance your demands to be a resilient, engaged lawyer. So building personal resources is going to be our focus. And in the resilience research, there are a number of science-backed competencies that have been found to contribute to resilience. And we have 10 up right now. These aren't the only ones, but these are ones that are well supported by science that people generally agree are important parts of developing resilience. And this is the research that was used by the folks who developed the U.S. Army Resilience Program. This is the research that they were looking at. And what they focus on primarily in their program are optimism, problem solving, meaning, self-efficacy, flexible thinking, self-regulation, and close relationships. And we're going to address a number of those in our program today as well. So before we launch into the individual factors, we just want to pause for a moment to also emphasize situational factors, which we're not going to be talking about today. By focusing on individual factors, we don't want to undermine the importance of what's going on in the environment, what's going on in the situation. Research actually shows that those things can be bigger contributors to things like well-being and engagement than the individual factors. So if you think about it like this, you're thinking about, a fish in a fishbowl, that little fish can be, as resilient and tough as can be. But if he's sitting in a bowl of water that is polluted and murky, he's going to end up, belly up, floating to the top. So the situation that we find ourselves in is really important. But in talking about resilience, the individual factors are also important. And I wrote an article for Law Practice Today last month that you can check out, that I did start talking about some of the situational factors. But today we're going to focus on the individual factors that we individually can work on developing. And the first individual resource we're going to talk about is flexible optimism. And I'm going to turn it over to Martha to talk about that.
Thanks, Anne. So our ability to choose how we think about the events in our lives really impacts our levels of resilience. So the first resource we're going to discuss is cultivating flexible optimism. So optimism is a disposition toward believing that the future is bright and that things will work out okay. So this resource of optimism involves what's called a positive explanatory style, which is how we explain the causes of the things that happen to us. So what this is really is a habit of thought that can lend itself either to mental toughness or make us prey to helplessness. So what does explanatory style really mean? Well, optimists attribute negative events to causes that are temporary, specific, and external. So temporary is recognizing that your negative experience won't last forever. Maybe you're struggling with a new area of the law, you're going to change your practice, and you're recognizing that while it's hard, I just don't understand this yet. Specific would be, I'm struggling with this problem, not I struggle with everything. And externalizing is recognizing that there are more factors at play beyond oneself. Pessimists are the opposite. So let's look at an example. All right, so this is an example of how explanatory styles can really impact us in our careers and our lives as attorneys. So here we have Mary and Peter. Both of these two work for the same firm. They're about the same vintage in their practice, and they have very similar credentials. Each of them have both had a bit of bad luck and each of them lost a big case. So both Mary and Peter went into a bit of a tailspin. They were sad, indecisive, anxious about the future. Any of those of you that have lost a trial, I'm sure can relate. But for Mary, the mood did not last very long. After 2 weeks, she told herself, all right, this is a tough result, but it's only one case. I'm a good lawyer, and I've had success in other matters. So she's looking that it's specific, right, to this one case. She sat down and she reviewed the history of the case, and she thought realistically, yeah, you know what, I could have prepared more for trial, and she thought of the different things she would do differently next time. But while she determined she could have prepared more and would do so in the future, she also recognized that this was a case that had some really bad facts. So she put it into perspective, and Mary bounced back quickly. Peter, however, spiraled into hopelessness. Instead of recognizing that this loss of this trial was just one bad result, he globalized it into thinking, like, I lost the trial because I can't perform under pressure and I can't do anything right. So this pessimism led him to figure that this is how his practice is always going to go, thinking, I'm not cut out for the law, I'm stupid, and I'm out of my league. So instead of it being a temporary situation, it's stable for him. This is how it is. And on top of this, he couldn't find the room to consider the impact of external factors, of bad facts, maybe a rogue witness, or the myriad of other reasons that trials could go south. So instead, he blamed it all on himself. So even as the rest of his practice was going well, he couldn't see it. He had difficulty coping with what contribute to psychological distress, like depression and anxiety. So as a result, he ends up with lower productivity and high turnover. So the scientific research on these explanatory styles impacts us. It shows that whether you have a pessimistic or an optimistic explanatory style can impact us in many different ways. Optimists expect good things to happen and tend to place the best face on adversity. So this makes it easier to remain positive, flexible, and resilient in the face of challenge. Optimism increases well-being and our ability to cope with stress, while also buffering against depression and anxiety. Research shows that optimists have better physical health and stronger relationships. They also are more productive, have lower turnover rates, which is great if you're in a law firm, and they're seen as better leaders. On the flip side, those with a pessimistic explanatory style tend to have the very opposite attributions. They expect the bad, and thus they tend to give up faster. Studies show that pessimistic thinking is bad for our well-being and is linked to depression, stress, and anxiety, as well as lower productivity and high turnover. So the reality is we all fall someplace on this spectrum between optimistic explanatory style and pessimistic explanatory style. So while we all may tend towards a default on what our explanatory style is, these styles can be learned. They can be developed and become habits. So this may surprise many of you. This is going to be a shocker, you guys, but the data suggests that lawyers tend to be more pessimistic. I'm sure your mind is probably blown by that comment, but it makes sense. Our job often demands pessimistic or pragmatic thinking. We assess risk, so we need to be attuned to what has or could go wrong so we can properly advise our clients. And it helps us to be good lawyers. The problem comes is that while pessimism is actually productive in many legal contexts, it's not always the best approach in all circumstances. So if you think about it, it's certainly not the best way to lead or to build client relationships. So another concern is that pessimism can be hard to keep confined to it just being a job skill that we turn off when we leave the office. It's really easy to take it home with us where it can interfere with our relationships and our physical and mental health. So from my own experience, I mean, certainly going home and responding to your spouse's new business idea with a list of all the reasons that it's going to blow up in his face, probably not the best relationship move and probably not the best move for resilience. So the key is to learn the ability to toggle between having a pessimistic and optimistic explanatory style depending on the circumstances. So for example, if you're reviewing a contract for a client, it's going to be best to be more pessimistic because you're going to want to be able to spot problematic language and foresee how different contractual provisions might cause future problems for your client. That is the time that pessimism is absolutely appropriate and should be used. But if you have a setback or a loss, that would be a good time to try to use some more optimism, to give yourself or the situation the benefit of the doubt and to monitor your self-talk. So I'm not saying to slap a smiley face on everything and ignore potential problems. What we're recommending is that you try to be positive but stay realistic. So optimism is particularly relevant when you're dealing with a situation where facts are not concrete or are open to interpretation, which is a lot of times. So in these cases, give yourself and others the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, you also need to be very, very realistic with yourself because you can get yourself into trouble if you're blind to potential problems. So take Mary in the example. She recognized that she lost her trial, and some of that had to do with the fact that she just had bad facts that she couldn't control. But she also recognized that she did not prepare enough. If she had just blamed bad facts or maybe a bad judge, she may never grow or learn from the experience. So the bottom line is when things happen, give yourself the benefit of the doubt while still being honest with yourself. So I think a quote that really sums this up that Anne and I both love is this one from the late researcher and professor Chris Peterson that says, people should be optimistic when the future can be changed by positive thinking, but not otherwise. When there is room for doubt, people should fill the gap with hope. So we have talked through the importance of paying attention to how we think about the things that happen to us, which are our explanatory styles. Another resilience strategy is about recognizing and thinking differently about a resource that lawyers have in abundance: stress. So yes, you heard me right. I just said that stress can be a resource. Stress can benefit us both physically and mentally. And whether you get these benefits has a lot to do with your mindset. And your mindset is your perspective here about stress. So I'd like you all to just take a minute and think about how you think about stress. What messages about stress do you get from your colleagues, your friends, from the media, just from the world around you? So based on that, do you tend to relate more to option number 1, which is that stress depletes my health and vitality, it debilitates my performance and productivity, that it inhibits learning and growth, or that the effects of stress are negative and should be avoided? So do you relate to option number 1? Or do you relate more to option number 2, that stress enhances performance and productivity, improves health and vitality, facilitates learning and growth, and the effects of stress are positive and should be embraced? So you got it? All right, so if you're more number 1, then you have more of a negative stress is bad mindset. If you're more number 2, you have more of a positive stress is good mindset. And if you're number 2, you probably can think of a time when stress helped you out, got you to the deadline, gave you the extra oomph to perform. So really, we get a lot of conflicting messages about stress. I just gave you a bunch. So which one's right? Now, there's a lot of research that does show that stress, especially if it's chronic, can be harmful to your physical and mental health. But here's the thing. Stress is, there's also a lot of research that shows that stress can be good for your health. Stress enhances performance and your focus. Research shows it improves memory, sharpens your hearing, makes your brain work faster. Stress can boost your immune system, is cardioprotective, and makes you stronger. So we get these conflicting messages about stress, right? And this is sometimes referred to as the stress paradox. So we hear all the scary messages about stress, like stress is going to make you die. So we try to reduce it. But by doing so, we also reduce the potential benefits of stress. So how do we make sense of all this? So first, it's by understanding what happens to us physically when we get stressed. And second, by recognizing that our bodies have more than one way to respond to stress. So when we get stressed, we have signs of increased arousal. So this is the activation of the sympathetic system. We might feel our heart racing. We might breathe faster, get sweaty palms. I mean, we've all had this feeling, right? So it might feel like nervousness, fear, anxiety, or excitement. So we feel this way. Our bodies react this way. And then we also kick out a variety of stress hormones. So from this point, there are a couple different ways our body will respond. One is commonly called the threat response and is associated with the harmful things we know about stress. And the other is referred to as a challenge response that's associated with benefits of stress. So the threat response, you start to feel the sympathetic system, right? Like you're feeling all the feels about like I'm anxious and your heart's beating faster. You might feel a little sweaty. So in the threat response, you're probably thinking, I can't do it, I'm going to fail. And your body responds to this in a fight or flight way, which is getting you physically ready to fight or run away. So if you think about it, this is not the best stress for lawyers. Everything in your body is going out to prepare you for a fist fight or to run away. So not the best coping mechanisms for professionalism, right? And it also doesn't support high cognitive functioning. So remember the stress hormones I said that your body kicks out? In this threat response, these hormones are released in a ratio that research shows to be harmful and associated with impaired immune function and depression. So that's the threat response. There's also what's referred to as a challenge response. Same activation of the sympathetic system, feels very much the same, but your physical response is very different. So here, your blood vessels are going to open, increasing the blood flow and cardiac efficiency. Our brains maximize our focus, our memory is boosted, and we think more quickly so we perform at our best. These same stress hormones are released, but in a ratio that's different. The ratio in the challenge response helps people to thrive under stress and is scientifically linked to reduced risk of anxiety, depression, heart disease, neurodegeneration, and other diseases commonly thought of as stress-induced. So it's also important to remember here that experiencing stress helps us to learn and get better at stress. So I bet that most of you on this call can better handle higher levels of stress than you could when you first started practicing law. So you know that time after you have a stressful event, like after a big motion that you've argued, and you have this feeling like you need to talk about it with somebody, or you're replaying it over and over again in your head and you're feeling emotional? That is your body and your brain remodeling itself to help you be better at handling stress. It's a form of stress inoculation. So the latest science shows that we have a lot of control over how we physiologically experience stress. We have a lot of control. And the interventions to have that control are pretty simple. So basically, the scientific research is showing that your mindset about stress matters. So how you think about stress matters. Just by recognizing that you are feeling stress and then thinking of it as your body getting you ready to meet a challenge instead of a sign of either your inability or the fact that you're going to choke is enough to change that stress hormone ratio from a threat response to a challenge response. So basically, your thoughts can actually alter your body's physiological response to one that best supports your performance. So we could talk forever about this, but if you're really interested in learning more about the fascinating research here, I encourage you to read a book called The Upside of Stress by Stanford stress researcher Kelly McGonigal. It's a really awesome book. So what is the bottom line here? Am I saying bring on all the stress because it's going to make you a superhero? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when it comes to stress, you already have beliefs about stress, and your beliefs about it, your mindset, is already impacting how you experience it. So since your beliefs are already altering your biochemistry one way or the other, ultimately impacting your emotions, how you respond to whatever triggered that stress, it's really in your best interest to choose to focus on the upside. So we encourage you to take a flexible approach. And this three-step process is a research-based way to help you take advantage of the benefits of stress. So number one, you want to notice your stress. So when you step into a situation and you're starting to feel all those feelings, notice that you're experiencing it and how it affects your body. Neuroscience research shows that just by noticing that you're stressed, by thinking, I'm stressed, that actually changes your brain's activity from the reactive center to the conscious and deliberate one. Then number two, welcome it. Recognize that stress is a response to something that you care about. Fundamentally, stress and meaning are linked. Think about what you find to be the most meaningful in your life. Is it your family? Is it love? Is it community? Taking care of your clients? Any of those things, stress goes hand in hand with those things. So connect to the positive motivation behind the stress. And then number three, use it. Recognize that it gives you energy to push through and to perform. Make use of that energy instead of wasting it trying to manage or reduce your stress. So this three-step process has been used to great success. Within 3 weeks of being taught to use these 3 steps, participants in a corporate training session were dealing better with stress, reported less anxiety and depression, better physical health, and reported feeling more focused at work. And the cool thing is that it was those with the most negative mindset about stress that showed the most improvements. So again, this is an area that with a little bit of attention to our thoughts, we can really use our stress as a resource. So next, Anne is going to talk to you about another really important research for resilience, which is connection.
All right, thank you, Martha. So we put the little U.S. Army logo up on the slide for areas that are taught in the U.S. Army's resilience program. And what that program found is that the biggest contributor to some of the harmful mental health conditions among soldiers were really related to disruption in relationships, often with their families back home. And so it's an area that the Army program spends a lot of time on, and we're going to talk a little bit about it here as well. And when I first started looking into this area, I have to say, like, my mind was blown about the volume of research showing the importance of good relationships to all forms of our physical and psychological well-being. I think everyone just sort of knows, like, well, sure, high-quality relationships are important, but what we really want to highlight for you is that the research is overwhelming in this area. And should really convince us to make relationships a higher priority than what many of us are able to make in the middle of our busy lives. And what the research generally has shown is that our need for connection, which basically means our need to feel that we love others and they're loved by, and we are loved by them with even just a few people, and also a sense of belonging within a community that we care about. And this is a product of evolution, that, you know, it's not just some little nice cotton candy thing, that we actually were hardwired this way because otherwise our communities couldn't have developed. And so our hormonal system, our wiring system works so that it actually creates the need for connection as a basic psychological need, that if we don't get fulfilled, there are all sorts of physical and psychological negative impacts of that. And the science in the area is really so overwhelming that multiple researchers in the area have said the good relationships are probably the single most important thing to psychological well-being, and that includes resilience. So again, I wish we had any one of these topics we could spend like the full 90 minutes on because they are so deep. So for each one of them, we're really just summarizing some of the research in the area and trying to give you a few tools and really pique your interest to perhaps wanting to learn more. So this slide is a brief summary of some of the research showing what are positive relationships connected to that we care about. So it's things like longevity of how long we live. People with close relationships live longer. They have reduced depression and anxiety. They are more likely to set high goals and attain them. Better immune system functioning. As far as meaningfulness goes within our work lives and our home lives, having close relationships typically is one of the most important factors. It also influences cardiovascular disease and reduced perceptions of pain and threat when we are with other folks. And I'll share with you just a few of the findings from the research that I find particularly interesting and fun. One of them involved a study in which what the researchers come up with some really strange studies. They had spouses together as part of the experiment, and they were putting the female spouse into a brain scanner so that they could monitor brain activity. And the spouse was near her in the treatment condition. And so then there would be they would let the woman know that she was about to experience a shock. And it's a low-level shock. They're not doing too much harm. And what they found is in the situations where the husband was holding the wife's hand, the brain activity was very different than when the woman was alone. So having someone there supporting you actually changed the physiological response to the apprehension of a threat. And there's multiple studies. That's kind of one of the more funny ones, but there's multiple studies making the same finding, that having these close connections actually change our physiological response to things that are in the environment. And another one that I liked also just shows like the reframing of that relationships can have, is that friends who were standing at the bottom of a hill, if you had a friend with you, you perceived the hill as less steep than when you were alone. So it's just such a great metaphor for so many things in our lives, that when we have people with us, the challenges that we have in our lives, we perceive them as more doable when we have support. So a subtopic under this area of quality relationships is social support. And social support is a particular kind of a relationship. Not all of them are necessarily, our close, intimate relationships like with our spouse and family. They are the folks in our networks that we feel like have our back. So if we have those connections where we feel if something happens, we know we have some people that we can reach out to, either the perception or the reality. It's not necessary that we're always calling on those resources, but we believe that we have them. This idea of social support has been repeatedly shown to be one of the most important resources to resilience, that we are much better able to handle stress and to bounce back when we feel like we have social support in our lives. So one way in thinking about work and how we can develop social support at work so we get these great benefits is thinking about how you interact at work. And I know, when I was at work, I was a partner in a big firm, and I'm an extremely task-oriented person, like many lawyers are. We get into the office, we're really focused on getting our work done and doing a great job for our clients. And so our interactions then tend to be task-oriented and really primarily about the work and only with those who work with us. That's not really an uncommon pattern for busy lawyers. What the research shows, though, is that in the big picture, we're really harming ourselves when we approach our work situation so narrowly. The folks that actually get out a little bit and connect with people that aren't in their immediate work environment, talk about things that are more personal, and actually develop friendships, those are the folks that are much more healthy. They're better able to stave off depression. They tend to be more engaged at work. So there's all these positive things where, when we're just focused on efficiency when we're at work, we're more likely in the long run to end up burned out and depressed. And so thinking about making it a priority of even putting it on your calendar, having a specific time during the day that you actually reach out and connect. Because I think if we don't make it a priority, I know from my own life that I'll just keep working because it's important to get our work done. But if we really want to have optimal functioning, be our best, we really do need to make connecting with others a much bigger priority. So there's a tool that we want to share with you. It's a fun tool that's well researched about how to improve the quality of your relationships and how those around you can help improve your environment as well. And this is a tool that, again, is taught in the U.S. Army's resilience program. And it's based on research about a thing called capitalizing. And all capitalizing means is that when good things happen to us, we share it with others. We don't just keep it to ourselves. And what the research shows is that the more we do that, and really the more people, the better, the more positive impact it has on us. That it boosts our mood and emotions, it boosts our life and work satisfaction in a way that having social support for negative emotions does not have. So there's some special addition about sharing good news that really boosts the quality of the relationship and our resilience. But so part of the thing here is for capitalizing to be effective, it's dependent on how others respond when we start sharing good news. And so in thinking about how we all can help others develop resilience in our work environment, we want to think about how we're responding when other people share good news with us. So there's this area, research in the area of active, constructive responding. And so I'm going to share some of the different ways that people respond and talk about which ones are the most beneficial. So we have our scenario, very excited. I won my big motion. I come in and share this, with one of my partners. I'm super excited about it. What are the possible responses that I might get? So one is passive destructive, which is basically a hijacker of your conversation. They just kind of ignore you and start talking about something else. So the response might be, well, yeah, such a big deal. I won the same issue last month. Is there any pizza left in the break room? And that has the effect of the person sharing the good news feels ignored, that they don't matter, and they might feel a little bit angry. So a negative impact. Another possible response is active destructive, what we call a joy thief. And that's really robbing your good news of all of its goodness. So, something like, yeah, you won, but that's because your judge really isn't very bright, and it's probably going to get reversed on appeal. So you better not be getting your client very excited. So this is really, overtly negative. And same response from the person sharing, though maybe even a little stronger about, feeling kind of mad and embarrassed about why did I even share this news with them? Boy, do I feel kind of bad about myself and others now. A third possible response is passive constructive. So this is there's positivity going on, but really no enthusiasm at all. So at least something like, good for you, and then I go back to typing an email on my computer, where there's not really any attempt to bring any enthusiasm to the conversation. And sort of, same kind of reaction from the person sharing is that they feel like they don't really matter to that person that they're sharing the good news with. So the last possible response is called active constructive, which is the joy multiplier. So that's a situation where, we all have these great friends that are so good at this, where you come and you say, I won my big motion, and they're so excited for you. It's as if they had won it themselves. That's so awesome. What's the issue? Was the client excited? In addition to showing an emotional positive reaction to it, they also ask questions so that they can help build the enthusiasm and really help the person savor some of the best elements of what had happened. And in that scenario, the person feels like they matter, that they were validated, they were understood, and this was a really good result. And the research shows that this only active constructive benefits the relationship, which sort of isn't surprising after looking at some of the other styles. And it also improves the self-efficacy of the person sharing. And self-efficacy is just basically the idea of confidence, of believing that I can achieve the task that I set out to. So you're both improving the quality of your relationship and also helping that person feel confident that they continue to be successful in the future. So it's a simple idea, but when you think about, again, of my life as a lawyer, and even now when we get so busy, someone comes in, you're in the middle of something, do you even look up from your computer, let alone thinking about pausing, giving the person your full attention, and really trying to help be enthusiastic and multiply their happiness in this event. So, just taking a few minutes can really make a big difference in another person's life. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. So our next topic, the next resource we want to talk about is positive emotions. Which just really we talked a little bit about in the idea of developing these high-quality relationships. It's an example of creating positive emotions. This is an area that is also taught in the U.S. Army program because it's so important, and I think it's one of the areas that we minimize, sort of like relationships. It's just something that we don't think about as much as we should. And what the research shows is that positive emotions are incredibly important to our sense of well-being and to our resilience. So for many years, negative emotions got all the attention. Researchers spent years understanding what the evolutionary purpose was of negative emotions. And it's pretty obvious. Something like fear has this action tendency that when you feel it, there's this fight or flight reaction. And so it was clear that where many of our negative emotions came from, why they developed in the evolutionary chain and have remained with us. But for a long time, people didn't understand what the purpose or use was of positive emotions. And some thought that maybe they were just, a byproduct and that they didn't really have any function at all. Some important researchers came along and started really studying what positive emotions do and why they're important. And they found that they are as important as negative emotions. So we can see that what negative emotions do is protect us in the case of threat. And what they found that positive emotions do is urge us toward growth and development and the development of resources in times of safety. And so the interesting research shows that when we experience positive emotions, we are more likely to be creative, to innovate, to explore, to connect with others. All of these things that are important for our future. And so it's the development of resources to help us survive in the future. And again, these are all physiological effects that are found when we experience positive emotions. And some of the many benefits of positive emotions are things that we care about as lawyers. So number one, resilience, of course, our big topic for today, but also individual and team performance, better physical health, life and work satisfaction, reduced symptoms of anxiety and depression. And there have been really great review articles that go at length collecting the research showing how important positive emotions are to being successful. So it's not just that successful people have positive emotions because they're successful. What the research shows is people become successful because they are able to experience more positive emotions in their lives. And as far as resilience goes, some of the really interesting research focuses on this idea of an undoing effect, that positive emotions help undo the effect of adversity in our lives. And so, for example, one study, an experiment would do these mean things that experimenters do, like put people in situations and tell them, you have 5 minutes to prepare for a speech where you're going to be evaluated by experts. So, right, of course, our stress response sort of goes through the roof. And what they find is that when they induce positive emotions in people that go through that experience, the cardiovascular recovery is much quicker than in those where they have neutral emotions, or don't do anything. So again, this of actively seeking positive emotions actually has a physiological response on our ability to bounce back. And they also found there were studies that were done after 9/11. And what they found is that folks who experienced more frequent positive emotions experienced less depression and less post-traumatic distress than folks who didn't. So again, these are real, this is real findings here, that it's not just this, we should be happier, that there is science showing a significant physiological impact by bringing more positive emotions into our lives. And the research shows that there's this idea of a positivity ratio. So lots of research shows that bad is stronger than good, and we probably understand that from the experience in our own lives. And so because bad stuff that happens impacts us more emotionally and can hang around longer, it really takes about 3 or more positive emotions to counterbalance that. So think about this as, in our lives of lawyers. And, I was an employment litigator. And so I sort of thought it could be like street fighting sometimes, where very often I would have multiple calls in a row of, opposing counsel yelling at me about something, a motion doesn't go right, a client is unhappy, an associate is unhappy. There are just these natural built-in parts of our jobs that are part of the jobs that we can't get around that are negative. And so we may, even more than others in some other types of jobs, have to be more mindful about when negative things happen, and they always do, of really being mindful about making sure we do things to add positive emotions. So, things like connecting with others is a great way to add positive emotions, but getting some more, experiences of joy and pride and all of those good positive emotions that are going to help counterbalance the negative stuff to really help boost our resilience and stave off the depression and anxiety that we are just a little bit more vulnerable to as lawyers. So one tool that we want to share with you about, a simple idea that you can do, you can incorporate into your life to add more positive emotions is one of the many gratitude strategies. So this is a simple idea of how you can be more mindful in your life about things for which you're grateful. So what we recommend is like every week, and oddly that's what the research shows, people vary, but basically to get the biggest bang for the buck on this activity, it's really best to do it once a week and to reflect on like the 3 to 5 things for which you're currently grateful. And people do this in a variety of ways. They can have like a written gratitude journal. There's multiple apps now. I have one on my own phone that reminds you in whatever time frame you want to be reminded. So you can set it up for once a week. It will remind you to go in and really give some thought to what good things are going on in my life that I want to pause and think about and write down. And you also might want to add a few more steps like, why did this good thing happen? And that's sort of like, active constructive responding with yourself, of really thinking about the details of the good stuff. And then, like everything, the challenge is to make it a habit. And the research on this has been pretty strong and consistent, that people that are able to make gratitude a regular part of their lives do have generally a higher sense of well-being. And so habits, habits are always hard to create and hard to break. And so something like an app perhaps that would remind you to do this, would be a great idea. And what happens as it becomes a habit is that your mind starts automatically searching for good stuff in your life. Because you've made a habit of start writing it down, your mind then starts naturally looking for it, which generally boosts your identification of positive emotions and your well-being. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about related to the title of our presentation today is grit and meaningful work. So grit is one of those areas that has gotten a lot of attention in the media lately. And what I found is what people mean when they talk about grit isn't necessarily aligned with what the scientific idea of grit is. When I hear it talked about, including within the legal profession, what it sounds like people are talking about is sort of some kind of a toughness, so that I'm able to take a punch to the gut and still keep on going. And that's not really what grit is from our perspective, from a scientific perspective. So Angela Duckworth is a scientist that's responsible for the creation of grit, and Martha and I both had the good fortune of being taught by her in our MAP program. She's an incredible person, and she's come up with this really great idea and research behind grit. And what she was researching was the idea of for people who are like world class in whatever they do, these high achieving people, what about them helped them get there? And what she came up with was the idea of grit, which is made up of perseverance and passion toward long-term goals. And for her, passion isn't any kind of an intensity of emotion, it's just consistency. It's sticking with it no matter what goes on, no matter what adversity, you stay with this thing so that you're able to then develop this world-class area of expertise. And so that's her general view of what grit is. And one of the important findings that she made during her research is that talent isn't as important as everybody thinks it is. That she finds that especially Americans have this preference toward talent. They love people that they think are naturally talented. But many of the people she studied, what she found is when they were young, they didn't display more talent than any of the other little people around them. What they found was because of their circumstances, their support of their parents, a lot of factors, that what talent they did have became skill because of effort. And what she finds is that effort actually counts twice in her idea of grit. That it's not just that, so you take your talent, you work really hard and it becomes skill, and then you take your skill and you work really hard and it becomes achievement. And so when you think about like, what does this mean for lawyers in law firms? And one thing that it means is that we need to think about creating environments where people feel safe to practice in new areas where they might fail. Because where we get our most high achieving potential is when we practice and we get feedback. And the challenge with many law firm environments is that people are afraid to try and get feedback because they think it will harm them. It will harm their reputation. They feel bad about it. They feel bad about themselves. They think they're going to lose their job. And so it's really important. One of these things that the grit research shows is it's so important to create environments where we will keep trying and that we keep that in mind wersselves, that when we do fail, it doesn't mean we're bad at this or that we'll never achieve. It just means we need to try harder. And we're not good at it yet, but we can be if we continue to input our effort and get good feedback about how to get better. And what Angela also found when she studied these paragons of grit is that they all consistently had these psychological resources that were important, and they tended to develop along these lines in this order. That first, they found something that was intrinsically interesting to them that they loved to do, and that's why they kept doing it, because it was fun. And then they developed a capacity to practice, and have the discipline to keep getting feedback so that they could improve and develop mastery. Then as they continued to develop, they developed a sense of purpose and meaningfulness in what they were doing. That it wasn't just something that gave them achievement, but somehow contributed to the world in a way that they felt was important. And all along, through all of these different steps, hope was there. And the way that she defines hope is basically the ability to keep getting back up even when you fail. And so when we look at these psychological resources, what does that mean for us as lawyers? How can we use this research? And I think one of the important questions that we need to ask is, what is it that we want to have grit toward? And what Angela's research shows is that it's not grit toward anything. It's not just that we always need to persevere no matter what because grit is somehow good in the abstract. It's not. Where grit is helpful is where it's used to pursue the higher order goals that are really important to us. If we decide something isn't important to us, or we really aren't ever going to get good enough at it, then we shouldn't show grit. That would be a bad use of grit. But when we have higher order goals and we pick the thing that we really have interest in and we really feel purposeful toward, that's what we should feel gritty for. So in thinking about grit and how we develop it, one important contributor is to figure out, why are we doing what we're doing? Why is it interesting to me? And what is my purpose in doing it? So like for me right now, my highest order goal is something like using psychological science to help the legal profession thrive. That's the highest order goal toward which I remain gritty and try to align all my lower order goals toward. For lawyers, what is it? And I think that that's part of the challenge is sometimes as we get busy developing as a lawyer, we forget why we did it to begin with. We forget why it was fun, and we forget where the meaning and purpose is. And so for us to improve our grit, one of the really important things for us to remember is to be mindful about what is the fun stuff and make sure I get to do that. Why do I think this is meaningful? Did I become a lawyer because I wanted to help others achieve their dreams, because fairness mattered to me? Like, whatever it is, being mindful about that will help us be gritty, will help us persevere when things get hard, and things always get hard. So an activity to help build your grit by helping to build your meaningfulness in your work is a values reflection activity, which has a lot of research around it of being very effective. And again, it's a simple thing. It's a simple activity that you can incorporate into your life that has been shown to have really good benefits. And the idea is to really think about what are your values. And there's a list of some possibilities up on the screen, but it's really sort of a personal identification of your own values. Like, I became a lawyer to help people. Is that one of your values? Then what you would want to do is periodically sit down, think about that, and write it. And writing, there's lots of research around writing about how important that is to really internalize it. So writing about what my value is, like it might be helping people, and how I got to do that in my daily life, how I get to do that as a lawyer, or how I've gotten to do that in my personal life. Since we're focusing on law here, it would be best to find values that connect you to law to help build your grittiness around overcoming adversity when things get tough as a lawyer. Okay, so the importance of grit, are all these great things of helping us pursue and persevere for our long-term goals. And part of what helps us make us gritty is the experience of meaningful work. So there's lots of awesome research just on the positive benefits of feeling that our work is meaningful and trying ways to cultivate that. And there's things that the firms and profession can do better around that as well, of just what is their messaging about why we do this and what is most important. And what the research shows is folks who have that experience of meaningfulness in their work have all these great benefits and many more. This is just a summary of course, resilience, our big topic for today. Also work engagement, higher work performance, better physical health, less depression and anxiety. So all of these good things about just experiencing our work as more meaningful. So our next topic resource is physical health, and I'm going to turn it over to Martha. But for the moderators, should we pause for a moment? Do we need to do any kind of a moderation thing at this point, or are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, Martha, I turn over to you.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, another really important resource that supports resilience is physical health. So this is an area that I found incredibly important to me, but we all know that exercise is important for your physical health, right? But what you might be surprised is that there's a ton of research out there that links physical activity to our mental health. So one highlight is that studies show exercise to be as effective at relieving depression as antidepressant medication and therapy. So when you consider, as Anne said at the top of the presentation, that data show that 28% of practicing attorneys struggle with some level of depression, exercise seems like a pretty crucial strategy. So there's a ton of other great research on the impact physical wellness has on our ability to be resilient. And I would love to spend 90 minutes talking to you about all the things about cognitive, like igniting your cognitive brain and all the stuff that is coming out with the connection between activity and physical wellness and mental and cognitive health. But we can't get to it all today. So I encourage you to go out and do some holiday reading. Grab Eat, Move, and Sleep by Tom Rath. It's a really fantastic quick read, and he goes through some really compelling research and offers some really workable strategies for you to try. So go read the book, lots of good strategies, and you can get some more information there. So another resilience resource that we're going to spend a little bit more time on is our mental flexibility. So the biggest influence on our own resilience is something really within our own control. It's the way that we think. We've already touched on some of these skills of mental flexibility when we discussed realistic optimism and stress mindset. But another skill is mindfulness. So mindfulness is everywhere these days. It's become something of a buzzword. In fact, the research on mindfulness has exploded over the past 15 years from only 15 published research articles in the year 2000 to 674 published studies in 2015. So what is mindfulness? The most common definition that we hear for mindfulness is this one given by Jon Kabat-Zinn. It is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So that's a mouthful. So I think it's helpful to break this definition down to something a little more simple and serviceable. So when I think about mindfulness, I think of it as the ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment while not getting carried away with it. If you can cultivate your awareness about what's going on in your mind when things happen to you instead of just reacting, you're going to have the space to make a choice on your response that's appropriate to the situation. So how do you do this? Well, a proven way to cultivate mindfulness is through a meditation practice. And this is where you focus attention on something like your breath. So one note here, it isn't always easy to do this. In fact, sometimes it's really hard. And that is just how mindfulness is. I mean, we see these covers on magazines that show blissful people sitting and meditating. That's not really what it's like. It's hard. So, a good way to think of it is to think of meditation as a lot like exercise. But instead of building muscles, you are building your ability to pay attention in the moment. So the benefits of developing a mindfulness meditation practice are many. Research is showing us that meditation can reduce stress. It can improve working memory and concentration, improve your emotional regulation. It can also lower levels of depression and anxiety, deter rumination, which I know I struggle with the ruminating about things sometimes, so it's a big one, and increase well-being. So all of these things are really important for our effectiveness as lawyers. So basically, mindfulness fosters mental flexibility, which are important factors for resilience. So how do you start? If you've not had any kind of mindfulness practice, where do you start? With even a minute a day or maybe 5 minutes a day. So, certainly you can take a class. You can go out in your community. I'm sure there's Google mindfulness, and I bet you'll find a bunch of classes you can take. But you can also download it as an app on your phone, which I found to be particularly helpful. So Headspace is a really good app that I've used because it starts you out at like 5 minutes, which 5 minutes a day sounds easy, but it can be pretty daunting when you're a busy attorney and person in your life. Another one that I really like is called Mindful. And if you like gadgets, check out this app called Muse. So I also really encourage you to listen to a free ABA webinar on YouTube by mindfulness expert Corey Muscara. That's a wonderful way to kind of get a good entry point into mindfulness. So the next tool we're going to talk about is related to mindfulness, as it requires that you develop an awareness of your thoughts in the present moment. And so it's referred to as cognitive reframing. So here is a hypothetical to get us into this tool. Lisa and Amy are working with Bill on a sensitive issue for a client. On Friday afternoon, Bill emails them both saying, I know I told you that your research projects were due next week, but I'll need them on Monday morning before 10 a.m. So Lisa is really upset. She ruminated about it for days, and this interfered with her ability to actually sit down and do the work. She was too busy worrying about why it was moved up to actually get the project done. Amy assumed there must be some good explanation for the deadline change. So why was Lisa unhappy? I mean, it's obvious, right? Let's see. Bill ruined her weekend. By moving up the due date for her research project, Bill completely screwed her over on her weekend. But not so fast. Think about this. Many people mistakenly believe that the external adverse event, like a last-minute deadline change, causes an emotional reaction like unhappiness. But if a particular adversity, like changing the deadline, inevitably led to a particular consequence, then Lisa and Amy would have shared the same reaction. We all would have shared that same reaction. So the myth is that adversity necessarily causes unhappiness. So the reality is that adversity, which is in this case Bill moving up the deadline, leads to a belief about the adversity, which then leads to the consequences. So Anne is going to delve into this a little bit more as she teaches you an important tool for self-awareness known as the ABCs.
All right, and we are starting to run a little short on time, so I'm going to get through everything, but I'm going to try to move promptly. So cognitive reframing is a tool that comes out of cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the questions I actually saw from someone in the audience asked whether cognitive behavioral type groups would be helpful. And they definitely are, to the extent that they help teach some of these skills that we're gonna talk about right now. So the ABC tool is, again, this is a tool that's taught in the U.S. Army as well, and it's a very simple tool to help us be mindful about how we are reacting to adversity. Most of us go through our lives just being reactive. Something bad happens and we have an emotional response and we don't think we have any control over it. The idea of ABC is to try to slow down those linkages. So an adversity strikes, that's the A, and then beliefs are triggered. And what that means is all of our social learning that has gone on through all of our lives has associated certain things that go on with lots of different thoughts. It might be like, I suck, I'm bad, whatever it is that immediately comes to mind when something bad happens, it triggers a judgment or a situation. And what we don't realize when we're just reacting is that what's going on is our mind is is interpreting what's going on. And so what we're going to try to do is tweak that interpretation so that the outcome of how you feel and how you manage it changes as well. So then the C, the consequences part of ABC, is the mental reaction. And so what we're trying to do is add some space in there between the time that the adversity happens and your emotional reaction, to add some space so you get to decide how to behave rather than just automatically responding. And the basic tools, the basic tool for using ABC is the bad thing happens, right? And you have this avalanche of negative thoughts and the behaviors that then come out of that go on. So the thing happens. Now what we want to do is try to slow down long enough to hear what is the chatter going on in your head? What are those automatic tapes that always start going? And how can we be slow enough to hear them and make a decision about whether we want to just react to them or whether we want to choose a different behavior? And this is why we talked about mindfulness meditation because it can help develop this resource of pausing. So you get an opportunity, you get enough space to choose what your reaction is going to be. Okay, so what this slide is showing, and we're going to make all the slides available for you. There's a lot of text on some of them to get through. This is showing that how an individual frames the adversity has an enormous impact on how they feel and how they behave. So Amy, who gave Bill the benefit of the doubt, she was able to respond in a more resilient way, where it was like, oh, probably something happened. He's basically a good guy. I'm going to go have lunch with him and talk it out. That's the optimistic way of responding. Lisa's perspective was like, oh, he's just a jerk. He's disrespectful. I never want to work with him again. And that may have a negative impact on her career. So part of all of this, in thinking about what are those automatic associations that happen in our minds, these automatic tapes and self-talk that happens when something bad happens, what are those? And what the science in the area has shown is there are some very common patterns of thinking. And each of us tend to have like our own go-tos. And here are some of them. There's like all or nothing thinking, all excess or all doom, overgeneralizing. If something is bad, it's all bad. Confirmation bias, which we really all have, that we only notice the information that confirms our belief. Helpless thinking, nothing will make a difference. Externalizing, everything has to do with somebody else. Personalizing, everything has to do with me. Mind reading, jumping to conclusions about why someone did something. And so that's related to jumping to conclusions, which is next. And so for me, like I sort of tend toward personalizing and mind reading. The others come in as well, but all of us sort of have these common go-tos, and it's helpful to figure out what ours are so that we're better able to kind of identify them and head them off at the pass. Trying to look at the time. So should we pause for questions here, moderators? And what we're going through next is to give some examples of how this works, but we also want to give an opportunity for questions. So I think it might be helpful to pause here. We'll make our slides available, and we also have some book recommendations so people can learn more about cognitive reframing and how they can incorporate it into their lives.
Thank you, Martha and Ann, for sharing your expertise today. It was a wonderful presentation. We are now ready to begin taking some questions from the audience. And one of the questions that came up several times was the name of Kelly McGonigal's book you mentioned earlier, which is The Upside of Stress. So that one is taken care of. And operator, I believe you have some instructions.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat function in the lower left corner of the webinar interface. Please type your question in the bottom field and click the send button. And before we take our first question, we'll now give you your ABA participation verification code required to receive CLE credit for this program. Please copy this code. You will be asked to enter the code in the online attendance form following this program. The ABA participation verification code is 743042115. That code again is 743042115. And I'll turn the program back to you, Nancy.
Okay, thank you. Martha, Ann, are there some questions that you would like to address at this point?
Yeah, so there's one important comment that somebody made that I want to make sure we mention because it's good and important. What somebody wanted to point out was be careful about how we're characterizing depression and suggesting that exercise is a good way to address depression. And the point the person wanted to make, which is such a good one, is that depression is on a spectrum. Major depressive order is a diagnosable disorder there's other just depressive symptoms. And what we're really talking about is prevention. For people who are experiencing continual depressive symptoms to the point that it's interfering with their lives, the best advice is to get help. And then let the expert in that field, which we are not, give the best advice about treatment. And so I do think that was a very good and important point, and we don't want to make light of diagnosable depression. What we're really trying to focus on is what are some of the good things that we can do to try to stave it off to begin with. That was one that I want to address. Let's see. Martha, I'm just scrolling through them now. Are there any questions that you want to address?
Is resilience something that you're really born with, or is it something that actually can be developed?
So this is a great question, and I have had people say with all confidence to me that they think that resilience really is something that you're just born with or you're not, and you're going to be strong and bounce back or you're not. And the truth is, as with most things, like both are right. That there are traits that we are born with that make some people better able at bouncing back. But what the research shows is that's a relatively small percentage, and that all the skills that we talked about today are developable skills, that science has shown are developable, that can really contribute to our resilience. And again, like almost everything we talked about were habits of mind. And habits are hard to change and develop, and we've talked about a lot. So one of the things that you might think about, given where we are in the time of year of thinking about your New Year's resolutions, and maybe picking one every other month, like work on stress mindset for 2 months, work on positive explanatory style for a couple of months, because you have to work on these. Like, happiness isn't easy, that it really does require work. And so there needs to be a concerted effort to develop these capacities to really take advantage of the research showing that we are able to develop our resilience.
There was also a question about addressing the positive effects of social interactions. And is there any research that talks about social interactions via social media, Facebook, et cetera?
There is, actually. And unfortunately, I'm not an expert in it, but I do find it interesting. And just like with most things, it's a complex answer, that for some people, it depends on why and how you use. Facebook is actually the one that I've read the most about, why and how you use it. That for people that use it for like positive social connection, which is how I use it, I connect with my family and my friends, and we share positive things, that it does have these positive social support kinds of benefits. But for folks who it can become an addiction for folks, and for some younger folks in particular, it can become just another way that they compare themselves to others, the social comparison problem, where they feel like they're not as good as others, and those kinds of things. Then it can have a negative effect. But used in a positive way, it can have positive benefits.
And another question about practicing mindfulness meditation. And someone wanted to know about how long, a general average, should one pursue that each day?
That's an awesome question. Yeah. As much as you can make yourself. Like, it's really the answer. And Martha, you should talk more about this, but I'll just let you know, like, Martha and I have a good friend who is trained as a Buddhist monk. And so we talk to him constantly about this area and our own struggles with developing our own meditation practice. And from his point of view, like he always says, get your butt on the pillow. Like, that's what he says. Like, even if it's a minute a day, start somewhere. And Martha and I, we both are totally convinced and committed to the research, but we still have a hard time working it into our days. So we actually created a competition with each other, and we were like holding each other socially accountable. Like, have you done your meditation today, and how much? And we started small. Just start with 5 minutes, if that's what you can manage. And that's what our friend the expert says. And then you can gradually gradually build it up. But in the beginning, it's whatever it takes that you feel like you can do so that you can create a habit.
And I'm going to jump in here. There was a couple questions about the apps I talked about. And for me, those kinds of things are really helpful because mindfulness meditation is a struggle for me. Like, I'm the poster child for needing it, which is why, like, Ann and I have both tried to do this together because it is such, like, the research is so compelling. So the apps I talked about, one of them is called Headspace. And that is an app. You put it on your phone. You can access it once a day, and they start you out small. Like, you start at 4 to 5 minutes a time. And it's a guided meditation. Then you can build from there. Another one is called Mindful. And what it does, it'll send you updates during the day, and it'll say, hey, take a minute right now and just focus on what you're doing right at this moment. You take a minute and you just think, I'm sitting here at my desk. I'm doing, and so it helps to cultivate that. So there is another little gadget thing that I really like. It's called Muse. And it's something that you get, you put it on your head. I know it sounds kind of like weird science kind of stuff for those of you that are my vintage. But it'll track your brain waves, and it'll give you feedback. So when your mind starts to wander, you'll hear things like the sea. And when you're in a place where you are just focused and kind of more calm, you'll hear birds. And so for people like me, and I'm guessing like you too, Anne, that like to achieve, then you get to the end of this and you think, I got 37 birds. This is awesome. So that is something that's also a good way to like delve into mindfulness. I think the key is having an entry point to where you can just at least start a habit of about 5 minutes a day.
We are officially out of time, but before we leave, I ask all the attendees who want CLE credit to stay connected for instructions to get your CLE certificate. To our faculty for this program, Anne Mary Bradford and Martha Knudsen, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. On behalf of the ABA, I'm Nancy Steck, thanking you all for joining us. Before leaving, wait for the evaluation to come up on your screen. Thank you. I'll now turn you over to our operator for some additional information.
Thank you. On behalf of the American Bar Association, thank you for participating in this program. Today's program was part of the ABA Free CLE Series, sponsored by the American Bar Association, Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs, Commission on Disability Rights, Solo, Small Firm and General Practice Division, Section of Family Law, Standing Committee on Legal Aid and Indigent Defendants, Section of Litigation, Young Lawyers Division, Law Practice Division, Criminal Justice Section, Health Law Section, Career Resource Center, Center for Professional Responsibility, Tort Trial and Insurance Practice Section, National Organization of Bar Counsel, Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers, and the ABA Center for Professional Development. Register now for the upcoming free CLE program, Freedom for All, a practical introduction to human trafficking and what you can do in your practice area, on Monday, January 9th. To view the program descriptions and all upcoming programs in the series, please visit the American Bar website at www.americanbar.org/CLE_free_CLE.html. Thank you and have a wonderful day.